Carlos. That's very kind, and that's a great setup for what I thought I could add here, because when I was originally asked to join this event, I did struggle over what I could contribute to this impressive panel. And really the only answer came when I drew upon why I joined Philip Morris. And prior to PMI, I actually served on 2 technology companies. I was responsible for the legal department of an ad tech startup. And then I was responsible for all things tech, amongst a bunch of other things, at a company which now predominantly makes income from data scraping. Both of those industries are ones where the law in many ways has yet to catch up. And the struggles to update the e-privacy directive into a regulation are indicative. And historically, they also haven't been the most compliant. This makes them cutting edge and exciting, but I have wanted more. And this ties into why the premise that you started with, Carlos. So I thank you for that again. In a world which has rapidly developing fourth industrial revolution technologies, I really wanted to join a company that thoughtfully considered the implications of its actions. Ethical decision-making is now part of PMI's fabric because it has to be. PMI doesn't shy away from its history, and it understands the baggage and responsibility that comes from being big tobacco. And believe me, there's a lot of baggage, which is why, as Carlos alluded to, PMI is undergoing a transformation, giving those who would otherwise continue to smoke a better alternative. And it's not doing it because it has to. It's doing it because it believes it is the right thing to do. Just like with artificial intelligence and other new technologies, they hold great promises, but you need to pair them with ethical oversight to ensure that they don't exacerbate social inequality or lead to human rights violations. So PMI may not be a cutting edge technology or data company. We are at the beginning of a B2C journey, but it is the kind of company that's doing the type of decision making that is there to try and meet the challenges that come with the promises offered by a lot of technological advances. I'm not going to try and educate anyone here about human rights law. We've been given great overviews already, and I'm sure that we will have more. However, it is worth remembering that law is pretty much always lagging behind technology. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Covenant on Human Rights were adopted after 2 world wars, and belated decision in defining and legalizing a system of universal values. Today really is no different, and we can't rely on lagging social, political, and legal processes to sufficiently provide the safeguards to ensure that these data-intensive technologies don't impede on human dignity, autonomy, and privacy, or the exercise of human rights in general. I'm not going to try and purport in terms of how, in a world where both states and companies are able to track and analyze, predict, and even manipulate people's behavior, how do we ensure that it's used to advance human progress and contribute to the promotion and protection of human rights? But I can instead give some small examples so I can illustrate how even tiny things can make big differences. Because as a lawyer, I know that we need more legislation. Until then, we also need ethical, responsible decision-making to work together and to always keep in mind that human rights are universal. Ethical decision-making can be as much about what is not done as well as what is done and addressing the consequences of each decision. At PMI, this isn't quite as exciting as making sure that we don't use technology such as face recognition for anything to do with supervision and control. Instead, it's more about decisions to stop selling cigarettes in the future and not invest today in selling them online, even during COVID, when there's been a significant rise in online shopping, social media use, etc. This decision has implications. As in many industries, our supply chain evolved rapidly during COVID. This has included an increase in unscrupulous actors acting online and selling illicit or counterfeit product. They're selling legitimate product in ways that don't comply with existing laws. While these challenges apply to e-commerce of any kind, they cause particular concern when it comes to the sale of age-related goods like tobacco and nicotine products. For example, illicit actors are unlikely to comply with minimum age laws and may share misleading messages about alternative nicotine systems. PMI recognizes that it has a responsibility to all of the consumers of its products, including those who purchase these illicit or counterfeit goods. It also recognizes it can't address these issues alone. So in today's hyper-connected world, with growing concerns around global security, the proliferation of criminal organizations, and the surge of new digital tools, it's more important than ever for public and private bodies, law enforcement agencies, brand owners, and online platforms to come together and exchange expertise, ideas, and opinions around common goals. We cannot advance human rights to address the challenges of today and tomorrow's technology as autonomous actors. Working together also reminds us that in a world which can feel highly polarized, or that the differences between countries and cultures seem huge, human rights are universal. Human rights are born out of the strong feelings that we have when a human need is ignored or interrupted. We're here today because of this. New technology may enhance or undermine those human rights, but it won't change how we can work together to continue to strive to make balanced, proportionate, and ethical decisions. Now, in terms of our overall privacy program at PMI, Navi talked about many laws, and she talked about the GDPR. That was a gift to privacy practitioners because it gives us a starting point to create a global standard. At PMI, we do have a global privacy program with the GDPR as a baseline, and it's applied even in countries where there is little privacy legislation. As those regulatory environments in other countries have caught up to Europe, often we therefore need little to be done because we already have those established principles, standards, and best practice. What can make privacy tricky for organizations is this balancing exercise, the need to be proportionate in your decision-making. And you have to do that with many tricky privacy questions to ensure you're lawful and fair. The e-privacy directive, which is still in the process of being revised, it fills some of the gaps that the GDPR has, which again shows how difficult this area is. I'm very much with Steve. Consent doesn't often equate to fairness, especially when individuals don't appreciate the consequences of their consent or don't really have much choice as to whether or not to give that consent because they want to end up using some service or product and they can't unless they give that consent. This inability to make privacy formulaic is really what keeps people like me in a job, but it is also one of the main things that makes privacy programs in large organizations difficult.